Good evening. A £10,000 reward for their daughter's safe return. The family of missing teenager Nora Quarren are desperate for any information that could help find her. It's been 9 days since the 15-year-old was last seen after she went missing from her chalet while on holiday in Malaysia. Police there have been scouring the jungle, calling her name. Here, the National Crime Agency say a British officer has also been sent out to assist in the investigation. Today, Nora's mother made an emotional plea, saying the family's hearts are breaking. With the latest, here's our correspondent, Simon Harris.
For more than a week, Nora Quarren's parents have endured the unimaginable horror of not knowing where she is or what's happened to her. Today, Maeve and Sebastian Quarren made a public appeal for help.
She has been vulnerable since the day she was born. She is so precious to us, and our hearts are breaking. We are appealing to anyone who has information about Nora to help us to find her.
Nora! In the Malaysian jungle, search teams blew whistles and called out Nora's name. Nora! Nora's parents are convinced the 15-year-old was kidnapped, but the Malaysian authorities are working on the theory she wandered off from the family's holiday cottage in a nearby eco-resort.
The family themselves don't align with that particular scenario because they know Nora like nobody else. They understand the limitations she has because of her special needs, the difficulty in movement over a significant period, and the way she would think, move and behave.
The police have also enlisted the help of a local shaman, a religious person said to have special powers, able to communicate with good and evil spirits.
Dia tertarik dengan budak ni sebab
the spirit was attracted to this child, he says here. It saw a special characteristic in the child which is not usual to them. As a police tactic, it might seem unconventional, but according to Clarence Mitchell, it shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. He worked with Kate and Jerry McCann when their 3-year-old daughter Madeline vanished in Portugal 12 years ago.
Nevertheless, if it brings comfort to the family, if it helps the local people to search harder and they respect the shaman figure, then whatever is necessary at the moment, but really it's going to be modern policing and technology that finds her.
The hunt for Nora Quarren was given another boost today after a businessman donated £10,000, which the family has offered as a reward for any information which helps find her.
So Simon, what more do we know about the police investigation?
Well, the police in Malaysia are very keen to talk about their search for Nora. They hold updates every day for the media. They absolutely refuse point blank to talk about their investigation into how or why she disappeared. We do now know that a member of the National Crime Agency, Britain's FBI if you like, has flown from London to Malaysia to give any assistance that the NCA can give. But on the wider question of how the police are investigating her disappearance, we're learning nothing new. There was talk last week of tests on fingerprints. They won't talk about that now. We don't know whether they've interviewed other hotel guests. We don't know whether they've done background checks on all the other hotel guests or background checks on any other staff. So it really is very difficult to understand what the police are doing apart from searching for her in the forest. But the family have said they'd like to publicly thank the Malaysian police for all their hard work.
All right, Simon, thank you. Good evening. After a desperate search that lasted more than a week, the parents of missing Londoner Nora Quarren received the most devastating news. A body discovered in the Malaysian jungle has been confirmed to be that of their daughter. The 15-year-old was found around 2 kilometres from the hotel where she and her family had been staying while on holiday. Nora, who was from Balham, had learning difficulties. Her parents say she has been vulnerable since the day she was born. And tonight they are still no closer to knowing what happened to her, as our correspondent Simon Harris reports.
For Nora Quarren's family, this was the moment their worst fears would be confirmed. Her 2 aunts and an uncle arrived at a mortuary. Nora's mum and dad were already inside, brought here by police to carry out a task no parent should ever have to. The family members have been brought here to identify the body that we recovered earlier, explained the local police chief. And the family has confirmed that the body is Nora Ann. Earlier, the jungle search teams had been stood down. A naked body had been found next to a stream 1.5 miles from the eco-resort where Nora's family was on holiday. The news was broken by a police officer who described the spot as a crime scene.
We sent our forensic team and the pathologists to the scene of crime and confirmed there's a body there. which resembles Nora.
Nora, who had learning difficulties, had been missing for more than a week.
Nora!
In recent days, the search had been stepped up.
Nora!
Yesterday, Nora's parents offered a £10,000 reward for information.
She has been vulnerable since the day she was born. She is so precious to us, and our hearts are breaking. We are appealing to anyone who has information about Nora to help us to find her.
Throughout the search, there appeared to be a conflict between the family and the police. Nora's parents thought kidnap the most likely explanation for her disappearance. But publicly, the police maintained there was no evidence of abduction. Instead, she apparently wandered off. Today, the body of the 15-year-old schoolgirl from Balham was winched from the jungle and flown to a mortuary by police helicopter.
Oh, to support her friends back here in London, Nora's school is open today during the school holidays. Simon Harris is there for us this evening. Simon, what's happening there tonight?
Lucretia, this is St Bede's Infant School in Balham, where Nora used to be a pupil, and where today the doors were open so anyone who knew the Quarrens could come in and pray for Nora and her family. The school is attached to the local Catholic church where the Quarrens worshipped, and where later this week a mass will be held. The school put out a message on Twitter saying, "This is the time we need to show the strength of our community and seek God's guidance and support in this heartbreaking and horrific moment."
And Simon, the search for Nora obviously over, but for her family, still so many questions about what happened here.
The police in Malaysia have been reluctant to talk about their investigation into why Nora disappeared, but there are so many questions. Not least, how did her body end up where it was found? What about those fingerprints that were found on the open window in the family's cottage? Where are Nora's clothes? Are there any footprints? And would a 15-year-old with learning difficulties really wander off into the jungle on her own? Answers to those are unlikely to come tonight. It's gone 1 o'clock in the morning now in Malaysia. But tomorrow, the police might know how Nora died after the results of a post-mortem examination are carried out.
Right, Simon, thank you. To Malaysia now, and Nora Quarren's family is still waiting for answers about what happened to her after results of a post-mortem were delayed. The 15-year-old from Balham was found dead yesterday, 10 days after she went missing. Our correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
The daily updates from the police have ended. Instead, attention focused on the hospital mortuary, where a pathologist was trying to establish how Nora died and when. News teams waited outside, but after several hours, it was clear the post-mortem examination was taking longer than expected. Nora's parents were represented at the hospital by a local solicitor who said the couple were distraught with grief.
They are really distraught with grief, and I feel the same. To lose a child, It's terrible.
In a statement, Nora's parents said, "We would like to thank all the people that have been searching for Nora and trying their best to find her. She is the truest and most precious girl, and we love her infinitely. The cruelty of her being taken away is unbearable. Our hearts are broken. We will always love our Nora."
Nora!
The search for Nora in the Malaysian jungle ended yesterday. Her naked body was found next to a stream 1.5 miles from the eco-resort where she was staying with her parents. The family was renting a cottage. Police suspect she climbed out of an open window during the night and wandered off. But her parents, who earlier this week offered a reward for information, believe she was kidnapped. Nora, who went to school in South London, was born with a brain disorder which left her with learning difficulties. Her mother's family are from Northern Ireland, and at Belfast City Hall today, a book of condolence was opened.
This was a family that was on holiday. This is a girl who is vulnerable, and I think the family have been through hell in the past few days. Whilst she hadn't been found, everybody hoped that she would be found safely, and it really is a very tragic story.
In Malaysia, there was no explanation for the delay to the post-mortem, but this police officer said the cause of death was unlikely to be known before tomorrow. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Good evening. How could someone break into a home and steal essential medical equipment from a very sick little girl? It is hard to comprehend that happening, but it has to a family from Essex living in Spain. Isla Caton from Hornchurch moved to Spain with her mum and dad last year to get treatment for a rare form of neuroblastoma. Isla is responding well to treatment and doctors say there is no evidence of the cancer. But now her family are facing another ordeal. Isla's mobility equipment has been stolen from their home by burglars who broke in. And we sent our correspondent Simon Harris to Spain to speak with the family as they appeal for help.
When Isla Caton goes for a paddle, it means more to her mum and dad than she can possibly know, because it's another sign of progress in her fight with cancer. The risk of infection once made this simple pleasure unthinkable. But Mike and Nikki's joy has been tempered by a callous robbery at their temporary home in the Spanish town of Sitges.
It really, really scared me because the fact that they were in the house and I didn't know. And I had my children there.
And 2 sugars, please.
The family moved to Spain from Hornchurch in East London a year ago, so Isla could undergo life-saving treatment not available in Britain. A few weeks ago, they were offered the use of a villa by one of the many people touched by Isla's story. The thieves climbed over this electric gate, which they forced off its runners, before breaking into the house to steal the couple's car keys, computer, and then their car.
We lost our pushchair and our baby seat, our laptop, our scooter, inconvenience of having to call up England and sort out cars and stuff like that, stuff that we don't really need to be worrying about when we could be playing with Isla.
We had hospital the next morning and one of my friends here, she had to take us, but I didn't have a car seat, so I couldn't get a taxi. I couldn't get on public transport because I didn't have a buggy and I didn't have a car. So I was literally stuck with nothing.
Isla was 2 when she was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. Doctors told her parents there was little hope. But when they heard about a revolutionary treatment combining immunotherapy and chemotherapy, they began a fundraising campaign to take Isla abroad. In March, they heard the news they had been waiting for. The Spanish medical team said Isla was showing no evidence of cancer.
In England, they told us she had 3 months to live. She would not make it till Christmas.
Or even her 4th birthday. There was a chance that she wouldn't. They said, do everything now because she might not make it.
It was just amazing to have her now cancer clear again.
There's a long way to go before doctors can be sure Isla has been cured. She's still having treatment in Spain. And at the end of the year, her parents hope to take her to America to try a vaccine which could prevent the disease returning. Simon Harris, ITV News, Sitges.
Now, one of the reasons London was chosen to host the Olympics 7 years ago, can you believe it, was what would be left behind long after the athletes had gone. The legacy of London 2012 was to be measured not only in the number of medals won, but also in the area of East London, which was redeveloped for the Games. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, has covered this since the bid went in 16 years ago. He's been back to Stratford to see how it's changed and how it's still changing.
7 years after London 2012 ended, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is still a building site, and the huge regeneration scheme will go on for many more years. But away from the pile drivers and diggers, this former industrial wasteland has blossomed. The park attracts 6.5 million visitors a year, like Julia and John Dulwich from Upminster on a day out with their grandchildren.
I think it's brilliant because there's a lot of things for the children to do, like the splash things. We bought their swimming costumes, so they've been in there first.
Having known the area before, because I worked locally, it's just changed so much.
When London applied to host the Games, this part of the Lower Lee Valley seemed an unlikely setting for a global sporting spectacular. But the backers of London's bid hoped regeneration would appeal to Olympic bosses. Back then, no one could be sure it would work. The International Olympic Committee must be convinced of London's merit over Paris, New York or Madrid. When I stood here 16 years ago, the skyline was dominated by electricity pylons, the canals and rivers appeared filthy. The Olympic makeover was hard to visualise. More than 200 businesses were evicted. They weren't the only ones. Travellers on 2 long-established sites were given their marching orders. Tracy Giles can see where she used to live from her new home, just outside the park.
We're not secluded, we're kind of exposed, it's open, It's a bit like a roundabout because there's heavy traffic. All the building works that have been taking place over the last decade or so, we've bared the brunt of all of that, so it doesn't feel nothing like the old place.
Gardeners were also part of the clear-out. These allotments on Waterden Road were bulldozed. Today, Peter STEELE has a plot on the new allotments next to a busy railway.
It's much, much tidier. We've got better facilities. We've got our own hut and toilet and things like that. On Waterden Road, it was a bit of a jungle, to be honest. It had been there nearly 100 years.
Are you winners or losers?
Definitely losers, definitely.
We're winners, I guess. It's an improvement overall.
Regeneration was one Olympic legacy promise. No white elephants was another. But although the stadium is home to West Ham, it's still losing millions of pounds. And taxpayers also foot the bill for the eye-catching aquatic centre.
All swimming pools and leisure centres have a burden on the public purse. We know that from local authorities. We recently had the World Championship diving here, so we've maintained that state-of-the-art facility. That's expensive to maintain as a facility. Having said that, people can swim here for the usual price of a local swim.
The Olympics transformed this part of East London. Eventually, 40,000 people will work here and more than 30,000 new homes are being built. But it's a project which won't be finished until the 2030s. Simon Harris, ITV News, Stratford.